A report released just last November by the UK-based Overseas Development Institute says that almost 40% of sub-Saharan African countries are in danger of slipping into a major debt crisis. Let's now look at these issues a little further. I'm now being joined on the news at 10 to discuss this by the Vice President of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mr. Gabriel Idahosa. I want to thank you so much indeed for joining us on the news at 10. Let's begin by looking at this, it seems to be a huge concern for a lot of people, but the federal government is giving the impression that there is nothing to worry about regarding the issue of debt. Do you share the same views with this line of thought by the government?
I think the government is saying so from the background that our debt position relative to GDP is not much to worry about at this time.
Okay, it's not something to worry about.
Yes.
So what would you say is the fueling factor in this case, since we're having this, it's about the highest we've had in the history of this country, and it's not a source of concern?
Yes, essentially what the government has been doing is to budget significantly based on debt rather than revenue. The revenue part of the budget is always less than 30–40%. So a lot of the budget is predicated on borrowing. So long as you keep borrowing, you're going to have your debt profile going higher and higher. So that's essentially translates into having to borrow a lot more than you would otherwise borrow if your revenues were high enough to meet your budget as you plan them.
Okay, now this is what we have. Nigeria's total public debt climbed to $79.437 billion. That's the equivalent of 24.38 trillion naira as at December 31st, 2018. According to the Debt Management Office, the DMO said that in its public debt profile, a report released on Thursday, representing a 12.25%. What are the ups and downs and the sides of this equation if we have to look at the development and how the country will progress?
Generally, the international benchmark for debt to equity that is a matter for concern is about 40%. If you are less than 40%, you probably have a lot of room to borrow. But that assumes that you are able to repay the debts comfortably. So the concern for Nigeria is not so much the fact that the debt to equity ratio is quite high, but the fact that we do not generate enough revenue to be able to meet the payment obligations of those debts. And that's why the government is saying that they have a lot of room to borrow. But that presumes that you are also generating enough revenue to meet the repayments significantly.
So now the DMO has also just come up with these two new bond issues in April 2029. That's a 10-year bond. And also April 2049, a 30-year bond, which is likely to shore up this debt profile further. But does the country have the capacity to redeem these debts at all?
Well, so long as we are able to continue to maintain the level of revenues that we have now, our capacity to pay will be going down. We have to significantly increase the level of revenue. The revenue generation has to grow much faster than what we are seeing now. Otherwise, we get to a situation where we will have challenges paying the debts alone, let alone getting revenue to finance our regular obligations like salaries and recurrent expenses. That is where the challenge really is.
What about infrastructure, for instance? If you look at the infrastructure deficit that we have in the country and the promises of this government to improve on that, side by side looking at the debt profile, what can you tell us?
Well, the government has never been able to really finance infrastructure from the budget. We have never been able to do that. That's why you find a lot of projects are not being financed, because the budget does not have the capacity to meet those infrastructure capital projects. We are either had to borrow to finance them, or we look to public-private partnerships. So expecting that we'll be able to finance significant infrastructure from the budget was something that was not sustainable. There was no basis for expecting it to happen. because the size of infrastructure deficit we have is far beyond what our annual budgets can expect to meet. We really were looking at private-public partnerships significantly to address infrastructure deficits, not the annual budgets. So you find a lot of the infrastructure projects are just undone because it was never going to be done if you were going to finance them from the Treasury. The Treasury just don't have that capacity to do that.
I do sincerely appreciate your enlightening us and giving us some of those very difficult questions, answers to those questions. The Vice President of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mr. Gabriel Idahosa, thank you so much indeed for talking to us.
Thank you.